Do you remember the forgotten 10-minute recipes hidden inside the joy of cooking? They once filled busy kitchens with warmth and thrift in equal measure. What else have we lost between those pages of everyday care? Eggs a la goldenrod was one of those quietly elegant dishes that proved how far a single egg could go. Hard-boiled eggs were chopped into a creamy white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk, seasoned just enough to feel comforting without being heavy. The golden yolks were pressed through a sieve and sprinkled on top like sunshine. It was ladled generously over buttered toast, warm and simple, but it felt refined enough to serve guests. Housewives swore by it for its thrift and speed, 10 minutes from pan to plate. The recipe appeared in early editions of The Joy of Cooking as a way to turn breakfast into something special without fuss or waste. It was food for busy mornings, for children before school, or for quiet dinners when money was tight. Even with such basic ingredients, it had an air of ceremony, a touch of care. The smell of warm milk and butter filled the kitchen like a soft promise. It was a reminder that nourishment could be beautiful when made with love and patience. Creamed mushrooms on crackers was the kind of dish that came together faster than guests could arrive, the perfect mix of grace and resourcefulness. A few spoonfuls of butter melted in a pan, a dusting of flour turned it thick, and milk smoothed it into something velvety. Sliced mushrooms followed, softening as they released their earthy aroma. The sauce simmered just long enough to turn glossy before being spooned over crisp crackers or buttered toast. In the 1940s and 1950s, this was elegant entertaining, simple ingredients dressed in charm. The Joy of Cooking called it a supper in miniature, perfect for evenings when friends dropped by unannounced. Housewives loved it because it looked refined yet cost little, using what was already in the pantry. The flavor balanced richness and simplicity, each bite creamy with a hint of woodland flavor. Served with martinis or lemonade, it fit every occasion. Creamed mushrooms on crackers reminded cooks that true hospitality was never about extravagance. It was about warmth, speed, and heart. Baked apples with cinnamon sugar were the heartwarming dessert that proved simplicity never went out of style. A 10-minute wonder that felt like hours of care. Core the apples, fill the hollow with brown sugar, cinnamon, and a pat of butter, then bake until the skin turned glossy and the filling bubbled over like molten caramel. The scent filled every corner of the house, sweet, spiced, and soft, like the comfort of wool blankets and laughter at the table. The apples collapsed slightly, their texture turning tender but not mushy, the syrup pooling at the bottom of the dish. The Joy of Cooking listed it among quick sweets, meant for nights when time was short, but the craving for kindness lingered. Served warm with cream, whipped topping, or ice cream, it felt indulgent without excess. Each bite carried the warmth of memory, the flavor of home, and the calm of something perfectly ordinary done perfectly well. Corn fritters with maple drizzle were pure Southern comfort, a 10-minute bridge between hunger and happiness. Corn, fresh or canned, was folded into a light batter of flour, egg, and milk, then dropped into a hot cast-iron skillet where it sizzled and rose into golden pillows. The outside crisped, the inside stayed soft, catching the faint sweetness of the corn. When drizzled with maple syrup, it became something transcendent. Sweet, savory, and nostalgic all at once. The Joy of Cooking called them a luncheon for all hours, and they lived up to that promise. They appeared at kitchen tables, church picnics, and roadside stands, eaten hot from paper towels while steam still curled into the air. Some cooks added green onion or bacon, others kept them plain, letting simplicity shine. Corn fritters with maple drizzle captured the rhythm of everyday cooking, fast, generous, and full of soul. They were food made to be shared, to be gone too soon. Tomato rarebit was comfort poured over toast. Imagine a smooth, cheese-rich sauce flavored with tomato, butter, and a pinch of mustard. Simple, warm, and filling. It was a cousin to Welsh rarebit, but humbler, faster, and easier to love. The Joy of Cooking tucked it among its light suppers, promising a full meal made in minutes. It was cooked in one pan, whisked until glossy, then ladled over slices of buttered bread or crackers. The result was creamy and tangy, with a sharpness that cut through the richness of cheese. It fit perfectly into the rhythms of everyday life, something to make after work or to stretch what was left in the icebox. Even when times were tight, this dish brought a touch of luxury to the table. The smell of tomato and melted cheese was like comfort distilled. Every bite carried the warmth of an era when simplicity was both necessity and art. Shrimp Wiggle was one of those mid-century wonders that sounded playful but tasted like pure indulgence. Canned shrimp were folded into a quick cream sauce made with milk, butter, and flour, then brightened with a handful of green peas. It was served bubbling hot over saltine crackers or toast, ready in 10 minutes and perfect for company. The Joy of Cooking presented it as a pantry meal, proof that elegance could live in a can. The name alone made people smile, a hint that mealtime could still be fun even when rushed. The sauce shimmered pale pink, the shrimp tender and mild. It was a dish that combined thrift with theater, turning modest ingredients into something you would never call ordinary. The moment you broke through the creamy layer with your fork, steam carried the scent of butter and the sea. It was quick cooking at its finest, cheerful, comforting, and quietly clever. Cottage cheese pancakes were the forgotten fitness favorite of the 1970s. High in protein, light in texture, and ready in minutes. Cottage cheese, eggs, and a spoonful of flour made the batter. A hot pan did the rest. They cooked fast, puffing slightly around the edges, golden on both sides. The Joy of Cooking promoted them as part of a modern health breakfast, long before protein was a buzzword. Their flavor was mild but rich, tangy from the cheese and soft like soufflé inside. Served with fruit, honey, or jam, they felt both wholesome and indulgent. They became a favorite of busy parents and early risers who wanted real food without the fuss. Each pancake was proof that nourishment could be effortless. The smell of them frying, warm, milky, slightly sweet, could make any morning softer. Today, few remember how simple they were to make, but once, they were the breakfast that promised a better day. Ham and pineapple foldovers were the decade's love letter to sweet and savory living. Thin slices of ham were topped with pineapple rings, brushed with mustard, and broiled on bread or biscuit halves until the edges crisped. The result was warm, tangy, and quick, a meal fit for both lunch and company. The Joy of Cooking listed it as a 10-minute sandwich, perfect for unexpected guests or late-night suppers. It was food that wore a smile, bright, colorful, unapologetically mid-century. The pineapple's sweetness met the salty ham in perfect balance, every bite delivering nostalgia in flavor form. These sandwiches sat proudly on holiday tables and weekday trays alike, their simplicity making them timeless. A sprinkle of grated cheese on top made them even better, melting into golden bubbles. It was fast food before the term existed, homemade and proud. Each foldover told the story of an era that loved flair without the wait. Egg nests were breakfast theater in 10 minutes flat. Egg whites were whipped into glossy clouds, shaped into little nests, and baked just long enough to firm before the yolks were added back in. The result was a dish that looked far fancier than it was, light, airy, and golden at the center. The Joy of Cooking described it as a dainty breakfast, perfect for brunches or special mornings. Housewives loved it because it turned a single egg into something spectacular. The contrast between the soft yolk and crisp-edged white made every bite feel delicate. Served with buttered toast or a slice of ham, it looked like something straight from a hotel breakfast tray. Children watched in awe as the nests puffed up in the oven. It was fast, pretty, and impossibly charming, the kind of forgotten magic that made morning feel like an occasion. Celery and olive sandwiches were the quiet, crisp heart of many bridge clubs and ladies' luncheons. Finely chopped celery mixed with sliced green olives and mayonnaise was spread thick between soft white bread, crusts neatly trimmed. The result was light, salty, and refreshing, a bite that crunched softly and vanished fast. They were the definition of elegance in simplicity, the kind of food that appeared without fanfare, but stayed in memory. The Joy of Cooking tucked this one away under quick sandwiches. proof that you could make something graceful in minutes. Served with tea or lemonade, they were more social ritual than recipe. Their freshness offset heavier dishes, making them a reliable favorite at every gathering. One bite was enough to recall the clink of china and the sound of soft laughter. It was food for conversation, light as air but full of care, the taste of a gentler time. Sardine toasts were a pantry miracle that turned the humblest can into something truly satisfying. The Joy of Cooking listed them among the quick meal ideas for when the cupboard looked bare, but dinner still needed dignity. Sardines were mashed with butter, lemon juice, and a little mustard until smooth, then spread generously over crisp toast or crackers. The flavor was bold and briny, the kind that lingered long after the last bite. In the 1940s and 1950s, this was considered smart cooking, high protein, low cost, and full of character. The scent filled the kitchen instantly, sea and spice together, reminding people that frugality could still taste like indulgence. Sometimes a sprinkle of paprika or parsley was added for color, but nothing fancy was needed. Each toast was a small victory of thrift and taste, a quick meal that felt worldly even when made from a single can. Mock crab salad was a dish that smiled through hard times, a clever illusion born from creativity. The Joy of Cooking included it as a quick fish substitute, though no crab ever swam near it. Chopped eggs, celery, and a bit of onion were folded into mayonnaise seasoned with paprika and vinegar. The flavor, surprisingly, came close, fresh, tangy, and satisfying on crackers or bread. It was a dish made by those who knew how to stretch the truth and a dollar at the same time. Served chilled in lettuce cups or on toast, it was both playful and practical. Housewives praised it for taste and speed. Children loved it because they believed the name. It was the taste of make-do magic, proving once again that imitation could be its own kind of art. Maple butter popovers rose high and proud in just 10 minutes, their golden shells hiding soft, steamy centers. The Joy of Cooking called them a breakfast for guests or gratitude, though they were simple enough for any day. Made from eggs, milk, and flour, the batter puffed in the heat of the oven until it formed perfect little cups. A drizzle of maple butter, just melted butter and syrup, turned them into something heavenly. They were crisp outside, airy within, and smelled like Sunday morning comfort. Served with coffee or hot tea, they disappeared almost as fast as they baked. Even decades later, their charm feels timeless. They were small triumphs of timing and patience, proof that good baking did not need hours or extravagance, only care. Every bite melted into sweetness and warmth, leaving the kitchen filled with the scent of maple and home. Curried deviled ham spread was the bold cousin of the ordinary sandwich filler. The Joy of Cooking tucked it under quick luncheons, where a handful of ingredients could transform into something unforgettable. Minced ham mixed with mustard, mayonnaise, and a touch of curry powder created a spread both spicy and savory. In 5 minutes, a leftover slice became lunch worth savoring. Served on rye or between saltines, it was a snack that tasted daring for its time. The curry added warmth, while the ham brought comfort, a combination that felt both familiar and new. It was the taste of post-war kitchens discovering spice and possibility. People made it for picnics, teas, or to fill celery sticks for hors d'oeuvres. It was proof that even fast food could be fearless. Cottage pudding with hot lemon sauce was the dessert that made any meal feel complete, no matter how simple the dinner that came before it. Despite its name, it was not pudding at all but a soft, buttery cake, light, fragrant, and ready to soak up every drop of syrup poured over it. The Joy of Cooking praised it as speedy comfort, something that could be mixed and baked in the time it took coffee to brew. Flour, milk, sugar, and butter came together in one bowl, transforming pantry staples into something worthy of company. The hot lemon sauce was what made it sing, a bright, golden syrup that cut through the sweetness like sunlight after rain. Served straight from the oven, steam curling up through the sauce, it filled kitchens with the scent of home. It was the dessert for long evenings, for Sunday suppers, or for quiet nights when a family needed something kind. Its beauty lay in its modesty. No frosting, no decoration, just truth and flavor. Every spoonful felt like gratitude made edible, a reminder that joy was often simple, quick, and within reach. Brown butter noodles with parsley turned the simplest ingredients into a dish worth slowing down for, a quiet ritual of care disguised as speed. The joy of cooking listed it under plain cookery, but anyone who made it knew how far from plain it truly was. Butter melted slowly in a skillet, turning from gold to amber, filling the kitchen with that nutty, toasted scent that could calm a weary day. The noodles, soft but sturdy, were tossed with the browned butter until they glistened like satin. A handful of chopped parsley followed, adding freshness and color, while salt and pepper finished the balance. In less than 10 minutes, a humble bowl became something that felt both grounding and indulgent. It was food for moments when silence and flavor spoke louder than words. Served alone or beside roasted vegetables, it fit every mood and season. The taste lingered long after the bowl was empty, buttery and fragrant. Brown butter noodles proved that patience, even for a few minutes, could transform the ordinary into something close to grace. Bacon cornmeal mush squares were breakfast ingenuity at its finest, a marriage of thrift and comfort passed quietly between generations. Cornmeal, salt, and water came together over heat, thickening into a dense porridge poured into pans to cool overnight. By morning, it cut firm, each slice ready for the skillet. Dropped into bacon drippings, the squares crackled, their edges turning golden and crisp, while the centers stayed tender and creamy. The joy of cooking called it poor man's delight, but those who ate it knew better. It was the kind of food that filled both hunger and heart. The smoky aroma of frying bacon wrapped the room like a blanket, mingling with the sweet earthiness of corn. Served with syrup, butter, or a side of eggs, it carried the dual promise of simplicity and satisfaction. Every family made it a little differently, yet the spirit stayed the same. Nothing wasted, everything loved. Bacon cornmeal mush squares were proof that good food doesn't come from wealth. It comes from wisdom and care. Quick cream of tomato soup was the post-war kitchen's answer to exhaustion, comfort built in the time it took the kettle to boil. Canned tomato soup, that pantry staple of mid-century America, was transformed into something rich and silky with a few simple touches. Milk replaced water, giving it warmth and body, while a pinch of baking soda kept it smooth and bright. The joy of cooking recommended a pat of butter at the end, letting it melt into a glossy swirl of richness. Served alongside crackers or a grilled cheese sandwich, it became more than a meal. It was reassurance, a daily ritual of warmth after long hours at work or school. The smell was both humble and nostalgic, the color a cheerful promise in a gray world. It was food for all ages, timeless in its quiet comfort. Quick cream of tomato soup reminded every cook that sometimes the smallest acts, a stir, a pour, a pause, can bring peace to the table. Buttered radishes on rye were elegance disguised as ease, a dish that thrived on freshness, restraint, and balance. Thin slices of bright radish were layered across thickly spread butter on hearty rye bread, then sprinkled with salt until they glistened like jewels. The joy of cooking praised their clean, sharp flavor, calling them the perfect quick bite for teas, luncheons, or afternoon gatherings. They were crisp, peppery, and soothing all at once, a perfect contrast of bite and cream. The dish took minutes to make, yet carried the quiet poise of something far more refined. Paired with soup or cucumber sandwiches, it brightened the plate with both color and texture, offering relief from heavier courses. Each bite delivered the taste of care disguised as simplicity. It was food that whispered, rather than shouted, speaking of good taste without effort. Though it faded from modern menus, buttered radishes on rye remain a reminder that elegance lives in the small, deliberate choices, a thin slice, a smooth spread, and a moment taken to savor. The best recipes were never complicated. They were simply right. Cold salmon mousse cups were the graceful darlings of mid-century entertaining, designed to impress guests without ever showing the rush behind the scenes. Leftover salmon was whipped with cream, lemon juice, and a touch of gelatin until pale, airy, and smooth, then spooned into small glass cups or molded into rings to chill. The Joy of Cooking listed it proudly under quick canapés, promising elegance in under 15 minutes. Served with crisp crackers, buttered toast, or cool cucumber slices, it was delicate yet rich, a recipe that turned scraps into sophistication. It spoke of hosts who knew how to make beauty from little, how to transform the ordinary into something memorable. The mousse shimmered lightly under soft light, its surface smooth as silk. Guests would take one bite and pause, a quiet moment of surprise at how light, refreshing, and lovely it was. Cold salmon mousse cups were more than food. They were confidence made edible, a gesture of care disguised as ease. Even now, one taste could still call back the calm glamour of the 1950s table. Applesauce spice cake in a skillet was the taste of comfort baked fast enough to keep up with a post-war kitchen. Housewives mixed it right in the pan: flour, sugar, applesauce, cinnamon, and a spoon of shortening. No separate bowl needed, no fuss to clean. In 10 minutes, it filled the air with the scent of spice and home. The batter rose into a tender golden cake that stayed moist from the applesauce itself, a trick every busy cook knew by heart. It was a recipe for a family that worked hard, loved deeply, and had little time to spare. The Joy of Cooking praised it as good economy, but those who made it knew it was more than that. It was gratitude, baked warm and fast. Served with a dollop of whipped cream or eaten straight from the skillet, it disappeared before it cooled. Every bite carried cinnamon and comfort, proof that even the simplest sweets could hold a family together at the end of a long day. The applesauce spice cake reminded a generation that ease and care could live side by side, all in one humble skillet. Banana coffee milkshake was the breakfast of speed and optimism, born in the pages of the 1950s when mornings had to move fast. Sliced banana, chilled milk, instant coffee, and a spoonful of sugar met in the blender for less than a minute, turning into something smooth, rich, and surprisingly elegant. The Joy of Cooking called it an energy drink. Though no one used the term then, it was simply the fuel for a modern life. Housewives drank it between errands, students sipped it before school. The banana softened the coffee's bitterness, giving it a mellow sweetness that felt indulgent but practical. It was the flavor of a time when progress meant convenience and health came bottled in glass. Served cold in tall cups with a straw, it captured the joy of new technology. Blenders, freezers, fridges, machines that promised to make living lighter. The banana coffee milkshake was more than breakfast. It was the taste of change. It proved that even the busiest mornings could start with something comforting, cool, and quick. Stuffed celery with pimento cheese was color and comfort disguised as party food. Celery sticks, washed crisp and cut into neat lengths, became little boats for smooth orange filling made from grated cheese, pimentos, and a dash of paprika. The Joy of Cooking placed it in the 10-minute appetizers section, right beside olives and deviled eggs, calling it cheerful and quick. On the plate, it looked like sunshine and freshness, bright green, vivid red, and gold. It was served at church teas, bridge clubs, and holiday dinners, balancing crunchy and creamy in each bite. No one needed a knife or fork. It was food meant to be picked up, tasted, and enjoyed in passing conversation. The pimento cheese gave a southern warmth to an otherwise northern snack, turning simplicity into a small moment of pride. For many, it was the first dish a child learned to make for guests. Every family had its own version. Some added mayonnaise, others mustard, but all agreed on one truth: it vanished fast. Stuffed celery with pimento cheese was joy in its purest form, proof that color could feed the spirit as much as the stomach. Cheese soufflé omelet was French in name, but American in rhythm. Fast, clever, and quietly impressive. Eggs were beaten until pale and airy, folded with shredded cheese, and poured into a hot skillet where they puffed up like a miracle. In less than 10 minutes, it rose high, golden on top, creamy at the center. The Joy of Cooking called it a dish for last-minute inspiration, and that it was a breakfast that felt elegant enough for guests, yet simple enough for any weekday morning. The trick was timing, a quick hand, a steady heat, and confidence that it would rise just right. When served, the omelet deflated slightly, settling into a soft cloud of richness that tasted like patience rewarded. It did not need garnish or sauce, just salt, pepper, and pride. Every bite was a balance of air and substance, lightness and care. In a decade chasing efficiency, this dish reminded cooks that speed could still hold beauty. The cheese soufflé omelet was proof that elegance could live in 10 quiet minutes. Quick crab imperial toasts were 10-minute luxury, proof that elegance could live in a can and still taste like celebration. Crab meat, fresh if you were lucky, tinned if you were practical, was mixed with cream, butter, egg yolk, paprika, and a splash of lemon juice before being spread thick over slices of soft white bread. Slipped under the broiler, it puffed and browned in moments, the surface bubbling like molten gold. The Joy of Cooking called it graceful economy, a phrase that captured the art of making something fine from nearly nothing. The scent of toasting crab and butter filled the kitchen with quiet richness, the kind that made guests think you had planned for days. Served on china plates or even paper napkins, it carried the same warmth, crisp at the edges, soft beneath, and deeply satisfying. For hosts with more pride than time, it was a miracle of speed and taste. Quick crab imperial toasts turned humble ingredients into hospitality itself, a fleeting bit of decadence made to last in memory. Fried apple sandwiches were born from hard times but carried forward through love and habit, the kind of food that soothed even before the first bite. Thin slices of tart apple were dredged in sugar and sometimes dusted with cinnamon, then fried in butter until the kitchen filled with that unmistakable scent, sweet, smoky, and warm. Once softened, the fruit was pressed between toasted bread, the butter seeping into every crumb. The Joy of Cooking reintroduced it as a Depression-era relic worth remembering, a dessert, breakfast, or comfort meal depending on the hour. The apples melted slightly, becoming something between pie filling and jam, a pocket of golden sweetness. Families who had little turned it into plenty, passing the recipe along as both sustenance and story. Served with hot tea or black coffee, it tasted of home, thrift, and tenderness. Fried apple sandwiches were proof that a little sugar, heat, and hope could feed the soul. Buttermilk dressing slaw was the bright, tangy salad that anchored Southern tables in the middle of the century. Shredded cabbage, sometimes with carrot or onion, was tossed with a quick dressing of buttermilk, vinegar, sugar, and a touch of mustard. The Joy of Cooking listed it as a quick mix that required no resting time, no patience, just appetite. It was crisp, creamy, and sharp all at once, balancing heavier dishes with freshness and bite. Served at picnics, barbecues, and Sunday suppers, it was both side and savior, something that tied every plate together. The tang of the buttermilk lingered pleasantly, cooling rich meats and fried foods. Every family had its own secret, more sugar for sweetness, more vinegar for bite, but the feeling stayed the same. It was food meant for laughter, outdoor tables, and full hearts. Buttermilk dressing slaw may have been made fast, but its taste stayed long after the plates were cleared. Maple glazed carrots with parsley were the quiet showstoppers of Joy's Vegetables in a Hurry, a recipe that turned an everyday root into something worthy of company. Peeled and sliced carrots simmered quickly in butter, maple syrup, and a pinch of salt until tender, glossy, and golden. The Joy of Cooking described them as bright with flavor and charm, the kind of side dish that proved care didn't need hours to show. In 10 minutes, they transformed from plain to polished, dressed in amber glaze and flecked with fresh parsley. Their sweetness balanced roasted meats while their color, vivid orange with green, lit up the table like stained glass in sunlight. The scent of maple filled the kitchen, rich but comforting, warm but never heavy. This was food that didn't need to speak loudly to be loved. Each bite was a blend of soft earthiness and bright sweetness, a small act of beauty on a plate. Even in modest kitchens, Maple glazed carrots gave ordinary dinners a touch of celebration. They reminded cooks that love wasn't measured in difficulty, but in attention, and that the best moments often came from the simplest pots. Cinnamon cream toast was breakfast wrapped in nostalgia, a dish that whispered rather than announced itself. Bread toasted to gold, spread thick with butter, and sprinkled with cinnamon sugar until it shimmered like amber. The Joy of Cooking called it a child's delight, a recipe that belonged to mornings when the world still felt kind. A quick pour of warm milk or cream softened the crust just enough to turn it into something between a pudding and a toast. It was sweet without excess, soft without losing shape, a balance that comforted quietly. The scent of cinnamon filled the air, blending with coffee and early sunlight. Mothers made it when there wasn't time for pancakes, but love still had to be shown. The milk pooled at the edges, the sugar crystallized on top, and the first bite melted like a promise of warmth. It was food that asked nothing but presence, reminding families that care could fit into a few minutes before the day began. Cinnamon cream toast slowed time, even in the busiest homes, turning 10 simple minutes into a memory worth keeping. Lemon icebox pudding cups were joy in chilled form, born from a time when refrigeration felt like a small miracle. Whipped cream, sugar, lemon juice, and crushed cookies were folded together in a bowl until they became something like edible sunshine. The Joy of Cooking called it a quick wonder, a recipe that captured light and ease in the span of a single afternoon. Poured into glass dishes and set in the icebox, it chilled into a dessert that looked as bright as it tasted. Tart met sweet in every spoonful, the coolness cutting through the summer heat or long evenings of chatter and card games. Housewives adored it because it was reliable, never fussy, always elegant. It required no oven, no skill, only care and timing. Served with a twist of lemon zest or a crumbly cookie on top, it glowed in the lamplight like gold. Every bite carried the optimism of modernity, when convenience and beauty finally shared a kitchen. Lemon icebox pudding cups reminded a generation that happiness could be simple, sweet, and cool enough to last until tomorrow. Hot buttered toast with cinnamon sugar was the unofficial breakfast of rushed mornings and picky eaters. No one had time to cook a full spread every day, and this sweet little trick turned plain white bread into something magical in under 5 minutes. You would toast a slice or two, spread on real butter while it was still hot, and then sprinkle a mix of cinnamon and sugar right on top. The butter would melt down, the cinnamon would sink in, and suddenly you had a breakfast that felt cozy and a little indulgent. No mess, no complaints, and no leftovers. This was one of those treats that kids never got tired of, and let's be honest, neither did adults. Some families even kept a shaker of cinnamon sugar pre-mixed and ready to go. You would find it next to the salt and pepper, like it belonged there. For all its simplicity, this toast had charm. It was quick, warm, and had a way of making even a gloomy morning a little brighter. Quick cornmeal. Mush was one of those Depression-era breakfasts that showed up in every rural cookbook and farmhouse kitchen when groceries ran low, but mornings still demanded something hot and filling. You would stir cornmeal into boiling water, cook it down to a thick, creamy consistency, and top it with butter, syrup, or even just a pinch of salt. Breakfast was done in 10 minutes flat, and somehow it stuck with you for hours. Families loved it because cornmeal was cheap, easy to store, and stretched into a satisfying meal without much effort. Some folks called it polenta, others called it mush, but it always worked the same: practical, no fuss, and surprisingly comforting. It filled bellies through winters, long work days, and school mornings when cereal was not an option. You could find versions of this recipe in old homemaker magazines, church fundraisers, and even government pamphlets reminding families how to get by with less. It is one of those breakfasts that quietly disappeared, replaced by boxed mixes and quick-fix meals. But back then, it kept people going. Vegetable fried rice with leftover meat transformed scraps and day-old rice into a fragrant dinner in less than 15 minutes. Cold-cooked rice was the key, each grain separating as it hit the hot oil of a wide skillet or wok. Bits of carrot, peas, and diced onions followed, their colors brightening as they sizzled. Leftover meat, whether pork chops, chicken, or beef, was sliced thin and tossed in with a splash of soy sauce and a drizzle of sesame oil. A quick scramble of eggs in the corner of the pan finished the dish, binding everything together with soft ribbons. The result was smoky and savory, carrying the scent of garlic and ginger through the house. Families appreciated how it cleared the refrigerator of odds and ends while creating a meal that tasted planned and special. Served hot straight from the pan, it proved that yesterday's rice and scraps of meat could become a satisfying dinner that rivaled takeout, saving both time and money without sacrificing flavor or comfort. Prune and walnut pinwheels combined natural sweetness with hearty texture in a cookie that seemed far fancier than its humble origins. Pitted prunes were simmered briefly and mashed into a smooth paste, sweetened with a touch of honey and a splash of lemon juice. Chopped walnuts were stirred in for a pleasant crunch. This filling was spread across a sheet of tender pastry dough which was rolled tightly into a log and chilled until firm. Slices were cut into neat spirals and baked until golden brown, filling the air with a warm, fruity aroma. The finished pinwheels offered a balance of rich nuts and mellow fruit that paired beautifully with coffee or sweet tea. They packed well in tins lined with wax paper and stayed moist even after a day in the summer heat. Elders appreciated their old-world flavor, while younger guests enjoyed the pretty swirls and chewy bite. These cookies represented the care and creativity of home bakers who turned simple dried fruit and pantry staples into something elegant enough for any church gathering. In a time before smoothie bowls and chia seeds, this was about as experimental as breakfast got. Shredded wheat with warm cream and sugar was comfort in a bowl, no matter how old you were. This was not the dry, tasteless cereal you might imagine. It was big, hearty biscuits of wheat that got softened with a pour of warm milk or cream, then sweetened with a spoonful of sugar or honey. It was slow food, the kind of breakfast you ate sitting down with steam rising from the bowl and maybe the morning paper nearby. Parents trusted it because it was filling, nutritious, and simple. No colors, no cartoon mascots, just real food. For kids, it became a ritual, something tied to winter mornings and wool socks and the smell of toast in the air. The soft texture made it feel like porridge, but with a little more body. It stuck with you in the best way. And if you were lucky, there might be a second helping waiting at the bottom of the pot. Buttered cornflake toast was one of those forgotten 10-minute breakfasts that once lived in every kid's cookbook or church bulletin. You would toast a slice of soft white bread, slather it with butter or peanut butter if you had it, then smash some cornflakes on top. That was it. Crunchy, sweet, filling, and ready before the school bus pulled up. It was not some gourmet recipe, just a quick fix that felt special on rushed mornings. Most families kept cereal on hand anyway, and this was a way to stretch it when the grocery budget was tight. Sometimes parents sprinkled sugar on top, other times it was plain, but either way it turned leftover cereal into breakfast that actually stuck with you. You could even swap peanut butter for jam or just plain butter, depending on what was left in the fridge. These kinds of quick breakfasts were everywhere in old cookbooks. Simple, made from pantry staples, and good enough to get everyone out the door without complaints. Texas chili dog plate made a hearty, messy dinner that satisfied every craving after a long workday. Hot dogs sizzled in a skillet while a can of chili warmed on the stove with a spoonful of cumin and smoked paprika to deepen the flavor. Soft buns were split and toasted lightly, ready to hold the hot dogs as soon as they browned. The steaming chili was spooned generously over each dog, followed by shredded cheddar and a scatter of diced onions for bite. The smell of spice and smoke filled the kitchen, drawing everyone to the table before the last dog was dressed. Each plate was a cheerful mess, requiring extra napkins and rewarding every bite with a mix of textures and flavors. It was inexpensive, quick and filling, perfect for nights when there was little time but big appetites. The combination of tender bun, juicy sausage, and rich chili sauce made this simple dish a lasting favorite in households that valued both speed and flavor. Oyster Cracker Scramble offered a clever way to stretch a few eggs into a filling dish for a crowd. A skillet of butter was heated until foamy, Then handfuls of plain oyster crackers were tossed in to soak up the flavor and toast lightly. Beaten eggs were poured over the crackers and stirred gently until just set, the crackers softening slightly while still holding a bit of crunch. A sprinkle of black pepper and a dash of milk gave the scramble a comforting richness without the need for extra cheese or meat. It was quick enough to make on a camp stove or church basement hot plate, which made it ideal for early morning preparations before the congregation arrived. Served with sliced tomatoes or fresh fruit, it provided a hearty breakfast or midday snack that tasted far more luxurious than its humble ingredients suggested. Families appreciated how far a carton of eggs could go when combined with a simple box of crackers, proving once again that frugal creativity brought people together over meals that nourished both body and spirit. Cornmeal griddle cakes were one of those no-fuss breakfasts that got the job done with nothing but grit, literally. In the post-war years, cornmeal was everywhere. It was affordable, dependable, and endlessly adaptable. Housewives used it as a stand-in for flour when money was tight, and these griddle cakes were one of the best ways to make a warm, filling breakfast without using up all your eggs or milk. Just a little cornmeal, water or milk, maybe an egg if you had one to spare, and you had a skillet-ready batter in minutes. The texture was slightly crisp around the edges, with a hearty middle that soaked up butter or syrup like it was born to. You might get applesauce on the side if it was fruit season, or just a smear of jam if sugar rations had eased up. Cornmeal griddle cakes reminded folks of simpler times, back when breakfast was cooked by hand and served with love, even if it came from a pan that was older than you were. It might not have looked like much, but it kept people full and it tasted like home. Sometimes that was more than enough. Poached egg. Over-stewed tomatoes was the kind of savory breakfast you would only find in old church cookbooks or handwritten recipe cards from a neighbor down the street. It was practical, filling, and ready in under 10 minutes, even if it sounded a little fancy. You would poach an egg, ladle some stewed tomatoes onto a plate, and serve it all with day-old biscuits or plain toast. The tomatoes were sweet and tangy, the egg added protein, and together they made breakfast that actually stuck with you through the morning. Families leaned on meals like this when money was tight and groceries were limited, especially during the Great Depression or lean years after the war. You did not need much: canned tomatoes, an egg, maybe some stale bread, and suddenly breakfast felt warm, filling, and just a little different than the usual toast. These meals disappeared as boxed cereals and frozen breakfasts took over, but back then it was one of the quiet ways people got through the morning with what little they had. Skillet hot dogs with onions and peppers brought the flavor of a street cart into the kitchen without the need for a grill. Hot dogs were scored and browned in a cast-iron pan, while sliced onions and bell peppers sautéed beside them in a little butter and salt. The vegetables softened and caramelized, releasing a sweetness that mingled with the smoky scent of the searing meat. Split rolls were toasted directly in the same pan to catch every bit of flavor. In less than 10 minutes, the hot dogs were nestled into the warm bread and piled high with the pepper and onion mixture, a quick dinner that felt indulgent and hearty. Families loved the one-pan cleanup and the way the dish fed a group with minimal effort. Each bite carried the taste of summer fairs and city sidewalks, proving that even a humble hot dog can become a meal worth remembering when time is short and hunger is strong. Vinegar pie sipper brought the spirit of frugality to the picnic in a surprisingly refreshing drink. This old-fashioned recipe started with a tangy syrup made by simmering cider vinegar with lemon peel and sugar until it thickened into a golden concentrate. Once cooled, the syrup was mixed with cold well water or chipped ice to create a drink that tasted like the sweet tart filling of a lemon pie. Some church cooks added a dash of nutmeg or cinnamon to give it a warm depth, while others left it pure and bright. It was served in simple mason jars or paper cups and offered an alternative to the usual sweet tea. The drink shocked newcomers with its first sip, tart enough to wake the senses yet soothing on a humid afternoon. It reminded everyone that ingenuity could turn pantry staples into something memorable and thirst-quenching. Children often puckered and laughed at the sharpness, while elders smiled, recalling how such recipes stretched budgets and lifted spirits during harder times when nothing could be wasted and every gathering celebrated resourcefulness. creamed peas on toast turned a bag of frozen peas and a little flour into a fast dinner that warmed the evening. Butter melted in a skillet while a spoonful of flour was whisked in to make a smooth roux. Then milk streamed in to form a creamy sauce. The peas went straight from freezer to pan, bright green against the pale gravy as they softened and released their sweetness. Thick slices of bread toasted in the same pan or under a quick broiler became the foundation, soaking up the sauce while staying crisp at the edges. A sprinkle of black pepper and a pinch of nutmeg gave the dish surprising depth, proof that simple pantry ingredients could still feel indulgent. Families loved how it filled plates in less than 10 minutes and cost almost nothing, making it a dependable weeknight standby. Children liked the mild flavor and the fun of cutting through the soft bread with a fork, while adults found comfort in its quiet, creamy richness. One bite carried the memory of suppers built on thrift and ingenuity, a reminder that speed and satisfaction can share the same plate when time and money are scarce, but hunger is real. Banana and wheat germ smoothies were the forgotten health food breakfast from the 1970s, back when nutrition guides promised energy in 10 minutes or less. You would blend a banana with milk, add a spoon of wheat germ, and maybe toss in honey if you had it. That was breakfast, quick, filling, and just trendy enough to feel like you were ahead of the curve. Parents loved it for being affordable, teens liked it for the simplicity, and health fads leaned hard on it as a protein-packed, no-fuss morning meal. It showed up in old diet books, homemaker columns, and those paper recipe handouts at grocery stores. Wheat germ was the health food of its time, promising fiber and nutrients without all the heavy cooking. Smoothies were new enough to feel exciting but easy enough to show up in every busy household. Somewhere along the way, this breakfast got lost behind flashy protein powders and complicated smoothie bowls, but back then, it quietly kept families full with nothing but fruit, milk, and a blender. Cottage cheese pancakes were a bit of a surprise, light, fluffy, and somehow richer than they had any right to be. Back then, cottage cheese was not a diet food or a sad side dish. It was a protein-packed miracle that found its way into everything, including pancakes. You would fold the cheese into a simple batter of eggs, flour, and milk, and the result was tender pancakes with a slight tang and an almost creamy bite. These were not sugar bombs. They were clean, filling, and quietly nutritious. Housewives looking to stretch a carton of eggs or cut down on flour loved them, and health-conscious families welcomed the change from typical flapjacks. You might top them with applesauce, sour cream, or just a pat of butter and a pinch of salt. They cooked quickly, smelled fantastic, and had the kind of texture that makes you pause between bites. Cottage cheese pancakes were proof that you could eat smart without feeling like you were missing out. Soft-boiled egg with buttered soldiers was the breakfast shortcut every British-American household swore by when time was tight, but comfort still mattered. You would soft-boil an egg, slice toast into thin strips called soldiers, and dip them right into the runny yolk. Breakfast done in under 10 minutes, warm, filling, and good enough to start even the busiest day. It was simple, practical, and everywhere in old cookbooks that cared more about frugality than fancy plating. Families leaned on meals like this when groceries ran low, but everyone still needed something protein-packed and fast. Kids loved it for the dipping, parents loved it for the speed, and it quietly filled countless tables from the 1930s through the 70s. Somewhere along the way, soft-boiled eggs and buttered soldiers disappeared under frozen waffles and drive-through breakfasts. But back then, it was one of those small, satisfying meals that made mornings a little easier. Egg and potato. Hash turned scraps into a filling supper that could be on the table before the day's stories were finished. Leftover boiled potatoes were diced and tossed into a hot skillet with a bit of butter until their edges crisped to a golden brown. Eggs were cracked directly over the sizzling potatoes, their yolks breaking to coat each bite in a rich sauce as they cooked. A sprinkle of salt, pepper, and maybe a dash of paprika was all it needed. The aroma of frying potatoes and eggs promised satisfaction and thrift, a meal built from yesterday's extras and today's needs. Served straight from the pan, the hash invited everyone to eat family style, forks clinking as the steam rose. It proved that speed never had to sacrifice comfort and that the best dinners often came from making the most of what was already on hand. orange gelatin soufflé. Cups brought a cheerful glow to every picnic spread. Instant pudding was whipped together with gelatin and a splash of fresh orange juice until it became light and airy. The mixture was poured into individual cups and chilled until softly set, forming a dessert that looked like a true soufflé, but required no oven at all. When served, the cups revealed a pale orange hue and a delicate citrus scent that lifted spirits on even the warmest days. Topped with a dollop of lightly sweetened whipped cream, they offered a smooth, creamy bite that melted instantly on the tongue. Churchgoers admired how quickly these treats could be prepared while still looking fancy enough for a special gathering. Children loved the bright color and gentle wobble that made each spoonful fun, while adults found the flavor refreshingly light after a plateful of savory dishes. This dessert proved that with a few pantry staples and a bit of creativity, even the simplest recipe could bring joy to a crowd gathered in faith and friendship. Pork chop sandwiches gave thin-cut chops a starring role in a dinner that felt hearty yet required little effort. Lightly seasoned pork chops hit a hot skillet and browned in minutes, their edges turning crisp while the meat stayed juicy inside. Soft sandwich buns toasted nearby, ready to cradle the sizzling chops as soon as they were done. Some families added pickles or a smear of mustard for tang, while others kept it simple, letting the rich flavor of the pork shine on its own. The entire meal came together before the evening news finished its first story, a perfect option for nights when work ran late. Each bite balanced the tender meat with the soft bread, creating a combination that was both rustic and satisfying. Affordable and fast, these sandwiches showed that even a modest cut of meat could deliver the comfort of a full supper without hours in the kitchen, keeping hunger at bay and spirits high. Raisin bran with warm milk and butter was the winter breakfast trick every frugal family knew when mornings were freezing, but there was still work to be done. You would pour bran flakes into a bowl, warm some milk on the stove, add a small scoop of butter, and pour it all over the cereal. Breakfast done in 10 minutes, flat, warm, creamy, and filling enough to carry you through the morning. Families leaned on meals like this when groceries ran tight, but everyone still needed something hot and practical to start the day. It was sweet from the raisins, buttery from the milk, and surprisingly comforting for something so simple. You could find versions of this breakfast in old community cookbooks, homemaker guides, and those faded recipe cards tucked in kitchen drawers. Some folks sprinkled sugar, others added cinnamon, but it always came back to the same quiet goal: stretch a little food as far as you could and start the day with something warm. Funny how those simple breakfasts disappear when new trends roll in. Puffed oven pancakes, known in some kitchens as Dutch babies, were the dramatic, golden breakfast showstoppers that took almost no effort to make. You would pour a simple batter of eggs, flour, and milk into a hot buttered skillet, then slide it into the oven and watch it puff up like magic. The edges would curl high, the center would bubble gently, and by the time you pulled it out, it looked like something from a bakery window. All it needed was a dusting of powdered sugar, maybe a squeeze of lemon or a spoonful of jam. It felt impressive, almost fancy, but the secret was how easy it truly was. Housewives appreciated the simplicity. Kids loved watching it rise, and everyone at the table dug in before it deflated, which it always did in the most satisfying way. This was the kind of breakfast that turned an ordinary morning into something memorable. Not too sweet, not too rich, and just different enough to feel exciting. One pan, a few ingredients, and suddenly, breakfast was a celebration. Egg salad on white bread, open-faced, was the speedy breakfast that showed up in every 1960s lunchroom and kitchen guide when mornings were short but something filling still needed to hit the table. You would mash pre-boiled eggs with mayo, salt, and pepper, spread it on white bread, and serve it open-faced. That was breakfast, ready in under 10 minutes, practical, affordable, and good enough to carry you through the day. Families leaned on meals like this when groceries were limited, but eggs stretched far and filled hungry bellies. It was not fancy, but it was reliable, tucked into community cookbooks and school lunch guides that promised quick, no-fuss meals. Some folks added pickles or herbs, others kept it plain, but either way, it turned leftover eggs into something that worked fast. These days, it is rare to see egg salad show up outside of potlucks or picnics, but back then, it was a small, simple breakfast that actually stuck with you. Beef and onion sandwich spread proved that deli leftovers could turn into a hearty supper in almost no time. Thin slices of roast beef, whether from a weekend dinner or the grocery counter, were chopped fine and folded into a bowl of mayonnaise and diced onions. A splash of Worcestershire sauce and a pinch of black pepper added depth, while the onions provided crunch and a sharp bite. The mixture chilled for just a few minutes while bread toasted and plates were set. Then it was piled thick between slices of rye or soft white sandwich bread. Some families liked a layer of crisp lettuce for freshness, while others spooned the spread onto crackers for an easy snack that still felt like a meal. It stretched a small amount of beef into several servings, saving both time and money while still tasting indulgent. Each bite combined creamy texture with savory meat and a gentle onion heat, the kind of simple pleasure that keeps everyone coming back for seconds. Quick to make, rich to eat, this spread turned odds and ends into a dinner worth remembering, proving that thrift and flavor can happily share the same table. Ginger ale. Ice cream float pie turned a favorite soda shop treat into a picnic-ready dessert. A graham cracker crust was pressed firmly into a pie pan and chilled while vanilla ice cream softened slightly on the counter. The ice cream was then mixed with bubbly ginger ale until smooth and lightly frothy, creating a creamy filling with a gentle spice and fizz. This mixture was poured into the crust and left to firm in the icebox until ready to serve. Just before cutting, a thin layer of whipped cream was spread across the top and sprinkled with crushed ginger snaps for extra crunch. Each slice tasted like an old-fashioned float, cool and sweet with a hint of ginger warmth. Because it required no baking and could be prepared hours ahead, it became a go-to dessert for hot summer gatherings. Children loved the effervescent flavor, while adults appreciated the nostalgic nod to soda fountain days. It captured the playful side of church picnics, where families mingled under the trees and every dish held a touch of celebration. Buttermilk biscuits with honey butter were pure comfort wrapped in a golden, flaky bite. You could taste the love in every layer. Buttermilk was a kitchen staple back then. Not something you bought in a carton, but something that came from letting milk sit a little too long. People used what they had. Biscuit dough came together quickly, especially for women who could eyeball measurements better than any cookbook. Cut with a drinking glass, baked in a hot oven and split open to reveal soft, steaming centers, these biscuits were the kind of breakfast you made on slow mornings when there was time to breathe. Honey butter? That was just softened butter whipped with a drizzle of honey, cheap, easy, and outrageously good. The sweetness melted into those warm biscuits like syrup into pancakes. You might serve it with jam, eggs, or sausage, but the biscuit was always the star. There was something grounding about starting your day with one. It said, "We may not have much, but we are going to eat well." Applesauce toast with nutmeg was the frugal breakfast tucked inside every homemaker column and Depression-era guide when groceries ran low but mornings kept coming. You would toast a slice of bread, smear it with applesauce, sprinkle a little nutmeg on top, and breakfast was done in under 10 minutes. It was practical, filling, and sweet enough to feel comforting when everything else felt stretched thin. Families leaned on meals like this when fruit was scarce, budgets were tight, and creativity had to carry the kitchen. Applesauce lasted longer than fresh fruit, nutmeg added warmth, and toast turned it all into a quick meal that actually filled you up. It was not fancy, but it worked, and you could find it everywhere from farm kitchens to city apartments. Some folks added butter, others kept it plain, but either way, it was one of those quiet little breakfasts that made hard mornings feel a little easier. These days, applesauce toast barely gets a mention, but back then it quietly carried families through. Turkey and cranberry sandwiches were like packing Thanksgiving into your lunchbox, sweet, savory, and a little sentimental. Slices of cold turkey layered with cranberry sauce, sometimes with stuffing if you were lucky, all held together by soft sandwich bread or a hearty roll. It was a meal wrapped in a memory, a bite of holiday in the middle of a school day. Most kids had it once a year, maybe the week after Thanksgiving, but some lucky ones got it more often, courtesy of a parent who knew how to turn leftovers into magic. The turkey was mild. The cranberry sauce added tang and sweetness. It felt like someone had put thought into your lunch. Not just a sandwich, but a reminder of home. You could spot it across the lunch table and know what it was. Today, the turkey and cranberry combo lives on in upscale delis and seasonal menus. Tell us which forgotten joy of cooking recipe you'd bring back to your kitchen, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so these quick classics keep finding their way home.